Hello everybody, I'm Kevin Killian, and I have with me today the curators of the new show at the Berkeley Art Museum, Hauntology. Over here is Scott Hewicker. He's an artist and a musician and a thinker. And over here is Lawrence Rinder.
Hello.
He's a curator and the director of the Berkeley Museum. You two fellas got together, put your heads together, and came up with the compelling idea, Hauntology. Now, it's a concept I'm sure we all know basically what it is, but maybe you could refresh the memories of our viewers. What is hauntology? Who invented this word?
All right, well, I first heard about hauntology and the term from Scott, and not that long ago. It was less than a year ago. I think it was probably in January of 2008, or 2009. And it was actually at a small Poets Theater event at CCA where you were performing, I believe, and Kevin and Scott, or you were directing, and Scott, you were in the production.
And I didn't even know it was involved with hauntology.
Well, it wasn't. This was just sort of intermission chatter, but it was kind of.
The play was The Corpse.
The Corpse by Russell Atkins.
Russell Atkins is a kind of a lost genius playwright.
Yeah.
Very little known. And
he lives in Ohio all by himself. He's 90 years old. He's like the grand old man of black poetry. And he wrote a play in the early 50s, The Corpse.
Right. So do you remember how it came up in our conversation? Was it because of the play, or?
I don't remember exactly how it started. I think maybe you were asking me about what I was working on or something, because I was working on a show at the time doing some watercolors that were sort of evoking these sort of mysterious photographs that I was picking out at sort of random, and I was sort of listening to Leland James Kirby's Sadly the Future is No Longer What It Was, which is sort of a hauntological key musical composition of three records, and where he takes sort of old ballroom recordings and kind of manipulates them and makes them a lot more ghostlier and sort of more menacing than they were. And so Larry was asking me about what hauntology was, and I said, well, I believe it's also a meme of philosophy, sort of a veil of a way of looking, at things. And Larry kind of looked at me like, since when? Since when? And then I was like, oh, I don't know. I kind of had to backpedal a bit. I wasn't sure. I believed it had to do with some kind of post-structuralist theory. I didn't know if it was Gilles Deleuze or Derrida or whatever. Yeah. So Larry researched it and came back to me with this great blog called Rouge's Phone by Adam Harper,
an English person. I don't know much about him, but he wrote a wonderful blog post, actually a series of blog posts. The first one was called The Hauntology, The Present and the Past, or The Past and the Present, anyway, something like that, The Past and the Present. And it's a really extensive sort of exploration of the idea of hauntology, and it goes clearly into the origins of the term, which was in this book by Derrida, The Spectres of Marx, which happens to have been the transcript of a lecture that he gave at UC Riverside in 1993 on the occasion of a conference about the post-Soviet, the nature of history in the post-Soviet era. And so this was Derrida's contribution. I believe it was the keynote lecture at that conference. Where your interest in hauntology was initially more around sort of the musical outgrowth of this, which was really a subgenre of electronic music in Britain in the 90s and 2000s.
Right.
What Adam Harper talked about was what would it look like if we were to apply the ideas of hauntology to the visual arts, and so he talked about Luc Tuymans and, interestingly, D.L. Alvarez, who's one of our very own San Francisco people, who moved back from Berlin to participate in a show here at Margaret Tedesco's gallery. We had recently acquired a work of Darrell's from Margaret's show, and we also own the work of Tuymans. And so I began to think, well, let's look at the work in our collection and see if there's a critical mass of work that resonates with this idea, that it clearly has some kind of presence in the culture at large. So I came back to Scott, I think, within 24 hours and said, well, Scott, that was an interesting thought at the poetry reading. How about curating a show with me?
As I look around, I can see that reading Derrida, he speaks of, he notes right away that from the beginning Marx was constantly used the idea of ghosts.
Yes.
And it begins his most famous work about the specter is haunting Europe.
Right.
And Derrida is kind of like, what's this all about?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is this important to Marx's thought, or is it just a colorful little decoration? And he seems to say it is important, and now more than ever, even though communism has fallen, because the specter of, I guess, utopia in one hand is still haunting us today.
Yes.
Even though we've moved into, like global, neoliberal globalism.
Right, and because it goes through sort of a litany of grievances of our current state, and basically the debt and homelessness and various things in social structure that are still occurring when sort of capitalism has been sort of conveyed as this all winning sort of ideology. And so that's where sort of like these the invisible is becoming visible again. You're seeing these cracks.
Right.
But there were ways in which, as I recall from the book, Derrida was not altogether happy with the idea of the haunted in Marx, and he felt that Marx was not happy with the presence of haunting in history. That Marx felt the need for a kind of a clean slate,
a general exorcism.
A general exorcism, and was Marx himself was haunted by the impossibility of a general exorcism. Haunting was not necessarily a good thing from Marx's perspective.
Yeah. What I see happening in your show, though, is that Marx is meeting Freud in a way, and that it's the similar ideas of running through Freud's head must have been, in the next generation.
Yeah, the uncanny.
The uncanny, the presence of the past in the present, the inability to move because the past, is weighted on our shoulders, and again, he must have been calling for some kind of exorcism too with his talking cure.
Right.
Because a lot of these pictures look psychologically creepy rather than, geopolitically.
Right. That is true, and I think that from the little I know about the subgenre of electronic music known as hauntological sound, I feel that it borrows more strongly from a kind of psychological notion of the haunted than on a geopolitical one. It really borrows a lot of the conventional affects of spookiness that one thinks about or associates with a psychological or an inner realm of hauntedness.
But it's also layering, I think, of technologies. It's like, the thing with new technology, evoking sort of this past archaic sound, kind of bringing up an archaeology of sounds, of not different kind of like sounds that weren't really meant to be, or were sort of like industrial music, not the more like music for commercial films and things that evoked sort of a nostalgia, but weren't really quite linked to a specific band or genre. So it was evoking this kind of past that in a kind of an unsettling way, or in some cases a euphoric way, where Simon Reynolds talks about like a Ghost Box label, which takes kind of evokes more of an Arcadian English, very Britishy past and stuff. In fact, he didn't really want to call it Hauntology. He wanted to call it, it had a bunch of different names, Memorabilia, Eldritch Chonica, but it was like way too Britishy, and then Hauntology sort of just stuck.
Yeah.
I think he thought it was too post-structural, but it's the perfect term for kind of describing it.
I think one of the distinctive things about Derrida's idea of the hauntological, and I think in some instances in the hauntological music or sound works, and in some of the works in this show, is this idea that is really, one could say, almost unique to the post-Soviet period, this idea that we're haunted by a past anticipation of utopia, that we're in a period where one can no longer anticipate utopia. And we're not haunted by utopia. Utopia never happened, but we're haunted by the fact that there was a time where people could anticipate a better future, a future that isn't beyond where we are now. So there's this strange kind of twisting of the the historical timeline. And I think some of that plays into hauntological music when there's an incorporation of sounds that were at one time futuristic, but are now seen as ruinous.
Look at all those people who collect World's Fair tchotchkes and kitsch.
Yeah.
Or Flintstones. Or the Jetsons.
The Jetsons.
It's like, yeah, there's something very sad about it today. Well, Scott, I don't want to put you on the spot as a spokesman for the hauntological music world, but you know more about it than I do.
Sure.
What is the difference between that and, say, the American version that Greil Marcus has been talking about all these years, about the basement tapes, the Harry Smith folk music anthology, the way that those, like, the weird sounds of American, the underclass, have gotten into pop music?
I think what Simon Reynolds is talking about is more of like a mixture, like a sampling. He talks about all kinds of sampling as a hauntological presence, hip hop, things that were recorded in different times at different places, and then they're put together and to sound like they're all one cohesive thing.
Like a zombie, like a Frankenstein.
Exactly.
Or Golem.
Or Golem, yes.
But I think in the current trend of hauntological sound, it's not so much about like a beat-oriented thing or like taking a funk sample, like a James Brown sample, into something new. I think it's more of evoking like a lost past. It has more of like a kind of a classical, kind of old world feel to it. Ruinous was a good term what Larry said, to evoke that kind of quality. But it's not just, it is basically kind of any sort of sampled sound that's sort of taken from what it was and sort of manipulated into another kind of idea.
But what is the politics of the hauntological music?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think, Mark Fisher talks a lot about dubstep, and in terms of Burial, the artist Burial, who sort of takes these kind of sounds and makes them more subterranean to evoke sort of like the current culture current emptiness culture in London, where there's sort of all these new buildings being built and signs for the future. They're trying to get ready for the Olympics. So everything is like sort of excited for 2012, which has its own kind of weird sort of, feeling because of 2012 being like sort of the Mayan apocalypse. But 2012 is coming, so there's all these buildings. It's sort of like this, what Mark Fisher calls an eventless horizon, and that we're constantly like being moved towards this future that has nothing that will just be constantly being pushed towards this thing that it's never going to happen.
It's like a conveyor belt, just never getting to
it. And then all these buildings will be built, and then will be ruins by the time the Olympics is over, even if the Olympics happens there. So I'm not sure if it's already confirmed that the Olympics are happening in London. But anyway, that's in one way where like an artist maybe, is sort of evoking this sort of ruinous future.
It's not exactly a progressive view politically. But I wouldn't call it reactionary either. I mean, I'm not sure what I would call it. I think in Derrida's formulation, he was, in his typically slippery way, was trying to maintain some kind of possibility for unexpected options and to keep the conditions of historical understanding in a dynamic form, so that both to work against the Marxist tendency towards pure exorcism on the one hand, and another idea of a kind of a plodding theological history in which there's no opportunity for doing anything but putting one foot in front of the other. So Derrida is always trying to make it difficult to have certainty about anything. Yeah. And of course Derrida has been criticized for that as being a kind of disenabling strategy. But on the other hand, it's anti-dogmatic, and I think there's a degree to which work like this, and hopefully the way we've done this show, is anti-dogmatic in that it just opens up spaces for reflection and is on some level skeptical in the classical sense of withholding judgment about what to do next, but setting aside certainties about what will happen.
Scott and Larry, you have focused on contemporary art, but with a fair number of artists from the past, I guess. What is it about contemporary art that attracts the nightmare of the revenant? And I wonder also that I see so many of your artists are local figures. They're from the Bay Area. And what is it about the Bay Area that attracts the haunted and the spooky? And do we, as artists living here, have a, I don't know, a direct vein into, you know, the Hellmouth? Maybe that's too many questions. But, I mean, you can see these traces of the haunted in art of all centuries, of course.
Yeah.
But you've got a lot of it in this room. And present day art seems to be kind of about maybe that eventless horizon that you were speaking of.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I can really, you know, speak for all of, you know, contemporary artists and everything. But I mean, San Francisco definitely has this kind of, you know, it sort of evokes sort of the past more than the future to me. But it's also, it's one of those places that people, you know, it's sort of a bias, you know, it's not like the major, it's not always considered the major center of contemporary art in America, but I feel like that it also gives a place to kind of explore more realms that, you know, in art that usually you can't really do so much in New York or in LA with like the, you know, sort of push towards, you know, commercialism or being, you know, towards current trends and everything.
Yeah.
I think people can look, you know, I think people can look back into the past to more archaic modes of production.
Let's take a look at this picture.
Yeah.
What does this tell us? What is it?
This is a photograph by Louis Baltz, who is a contemporary photographer, but this was done in the early 70s. He did this kind of amazing body of work of where he took, he photographed the industrial parks of Irvine, California. And Irvine, California is my hometown. And so they're kind of these pictures of, you know, sort of not the like kind of the idyllic sort of, you know, Irvine is sort of like the orange, you know, has the orange groves and the Irvine Ranch, and has like you know, these plant communities and everything like that. But then he kind of took the different approach to Irvine and sort of these parking lots and these sort of, you know, the very beginnings of sort of new industry and sort of behind the scenes of these new parks that were coming around. And this window in particular, you know, the Berkeley collection has a few of these, but this one struck me the most because this is the window of the Ryco Corporation. It's located off of the Newport Freeway, and I used to drive by this window a lot on the freeway, probably to either my grandmother's house or something. But I used to see this window a lot, and it always reminded me of this future. Like I always thought of Logan's Run, and you know that I'm kind of a big fan of that book and movie. And anyway, so I always thought of this, it had this kind of future that I always sort of thought was kind of amazing and, you know, really kind of evoked this, like, I don't know, we're going to live in this sort of glass world and it's going to be silvery finishes and we're going to have this fabulous furniture. But there's like this corporation that sort of like kind of started in, you know, it kind of moved into Irvine and sort of this area kind of became this major industrial complex where it slowly took over all the agricultural businesses and started making Irvine kind of into this very like kind of, you know, very prefabricated, you know,
Like Stepford.
yeah, very like Stepford, where it didn't, like my childhood with Irvine doesn't, like early childhood memories, it's more like it was very ranch-like, farm-like, and now it's all these kind of, you know, plastic businesses, same strip malls everywhere, multiplexes, and very nice, rich kind of gated communities. And so it's sort of this future that no longer, kind of represents this future that didn't really happen for me. And it kind of has this sort of evil sort of presence to, you know, to me. And the chair is kind of interesting because I always think of like, when I was thinking of the show, like the spiritualist chair, the sort of the visible, invisible, the ghost, it's something that's sitting, you know, a placement for the invisible body. And so like, and so the role of the chair, who's going to be in that chair, And in terms of the corporation, who's going to be controlled and who's controlling, and all these kinds of things. And it's sort of this sad kind of moment for me. So that's why I really was drawn to this image in particular.
It's terribly sad. And you put it right in front of, on top of Vincent Fecto's sculpture of, I don't know,
it's this weird, there's this
like
weird,
an architectural maquette.
It's like an architectural maquette. It's like an auditorium, but it's a place for placelessness. It's not meant for a person. It's neither a maquette nor is it a dollhouse. It's somewhere in between those things and none of those things. It's supposed to evoke something that you could be in, but you can't be in it. And so there was sort of this in between placelessness of it that I've always loved this sculpture because I've seen it, a few times. I think it was from Paul Engel, and it just, I don't know, it's just, that kind of thing where I used to play with, Star Trek figures and things, make these things like that. But it's not about, it's this weirder thing.
It also has an ambiguous status as construction and ruin. I mean, it looks like something that may be under construction or be a ruin of something that previously existed. And this pine cone is a kind of a haunting of a pre-civilized order.
Yeah.
I think it's
garden that's lost to us.
Yes, I think it's a wonderfully ambiguous piece and has marvelous echoes with the vaults, formally speaking.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, what was the first work that you thought of for the show? Maybe you answered that.
Well, I think we had different first works, maybe in mind. Larry had picked out a selection of recent acquisitions at Sietsema. I think Karina Bauman was one of the first that I think I remember.
Yeah.
And the first thing I looked at, I think, was one of them was actually a piece that didn't make it into the show, but it was the kind of the impetus for looking at kind of older pieces was the should I bother you to explain? But it was the Henry Alexander.
Which is interesting to get back to your comment before, Kevin, about is the Bay Area sort of at the maw of doom or whatever, that Henry Alexander was this great San Francisco painter, 19th century painter who painted these very kind of creepy Victorian paintings, but delightful, wonderful. We own about 5 of them. There's very few left. Most of them perished in the fire of 1906 after the earthquake. But he is a quintessential Victorian San Francisco painter, and the work definitely has this sort of mood of otherness or some kind of strange, uncanny presentiment about them.
Yeah, the painting was called The Lost Genius, and it featured I think it was like a shoemaker in his shop, but he's playing a violin, and there's a little girl kind of in a shadow, sort of in the doorway, and it kind of has this sort of old Europe kind of feeling to me. And I was reading I was reading a lot on the post-communist era, and about like a lot of people like in Czechoslovakia who are professors and economists who were sort of, after the revolution of '68, were sort of relegated to, bulldozer drivers and labormen. So, and it just had this feeling of something that, something that was meant to happen that didn't happen. And so, I mean, that was sort of one of the key pieces that sort of evoked that quality, and I was sort of looking towards for the show. Fortunately, it didn't quite go with any. It sort of kind of rubbed up against all the other work in the kind of the wrong way, so we couldn't include it.
Yeah, ultimately you have to weave it all together. So we brought up initially probably about twice as many works, and then once we got them into the gallery, we brought it down to this arrangement here.
Well, let's look at a few of those contemporary art, recent acquisitions by contemporary artists. But first, I did want to look at the Maybach picture and the picture by Jess as examples, maybe, of the horrific past of the Bay Area and how it's still with us. And here we have a very strange picture by Bernard Maybach, who I think of as the guy who brought arts and crafts movement to Berkeley. But here instead, it's some kind of like neoclassical, utopian kind of nightmare with this strange, I don't know, what is it, a serpent for a fountain? And then some kind of strange shepherd girl or Amazon like are about to destroy the plaza.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the provenance of this the piece is. I believe it's has to do with Circe, and from the Odyssey.
Yeah.
And but I think his sort of conglomeration of all these different styles, sort of romantic and Gothic and early 20th century arts and crafts, was kind of evoked these sort of timelessness, a pastime, but like not one that you could quite locate. And it seemed to be sort of in this kind of netherworld. And I was sort of, I was drawn to him because he's a Bay Area, and because, we have such a presence of, his works, architectural works here, but also because of his work for the Bohemian Grove, which sort of has its own kind of weird, clandestine Republican ritual, backstory, rumors, and that kind of thing. So there's always sort of this, not that he was actually probably part of that, but maybe these settings that he created for, the Bohemian Club and its members. But I just thought it would kind of start off the show with this sort of,
Sort of. This is picture number one.
Yeah.
This is what you see first when you come
Exactly. This sort of strange, idyllic quality, but like in a very sort of dreamlike place. Sort of like where you see in films right before kind of gets a little bit more nightmarish. And so, this sort of haunting.
Like these are what? Dovecotes, I expect, but I don't know.
We don't know.
But if Stephen King were here, that something awful would come out of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Those holes.
It has sort of a face quality into it, and it looks like it's meant for some kind of, ceremony or ritual to take place.
Let's look at Jess's picture of the Winchester, Sarah Winchester, beautiful one. That belongs to the museum too? Or
Yes,
did you borrow it?
that belongs to the museum, and actually Coulter informed me today when we went through that Jess would have been very happy because he always hung his pictures low so that children could appreciate them. So this is
that's nice.
So we didn't do it for that reason, but there it is. So yes, this is a work of Jess's in our collection, and it's really a wonderful piece, a portrait of Sarah Winchester, who was the heir to the Winchester repeating rifle fortune and built a so-called Winchester Mystery House in San Jose. And her motivation for building that house was her fear of the ghosts of the Native Americans who had been killed by Winchester rifles, who were coming back to haunt her. And she was told by a medium, I believe, that if she continued to build this house in this sort of cockamamie way where the stairs led nowhere, that the ghosts wouldn't be able to find her. So she is a sort of a quintessential modern haunted figure.
Jess seems to have given her some happiness, though, and fashion sense in this picture. She seems more content than I'm used to thinking of her.
Well, it is the only, I believe it's the only portrait that exists, the only known photograph. It's basically the only known photograph that existed of her. And so it does, it's a little bit more kind of psychedelic.
Yeah.
It does quite have sort of that sort of bohemian 50s, 60s kind of quality.
Well, just the layering of all that paint on top of the paint to give it more dimensions.
Yeah.
Look at that, feathers in her hat, and I don't know, leaves and feathers and whatever.
But it was also nice to start the show as sort of already in mourning.
Yeah.
Like the, the
And
death had
fear.
already happened.
And we're afraid of what's going to happen.
Yeah, so we're evoking memory through, of people who've passed on, through like Patty Robichaud's, sort of the I don't know what you call it.
There's a technical term. This is a mourning picture, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G.
Yeah.
It was typical of people to make these for departed loved ones.
And then the George Walt, it reminds me of like a death mass of Verlaine. And the poet
It is
Verlaine.
Verlaine.
Yeah.
Whether it's a death
mass, I don't know, but the very weird angle, and you don't really quite see his shoulders or anything.
Could be in a mud bath, one of those things.
Yeah.
Or they're bringing his head on a silver platter for King Herod.
And then also one of my particular favorites was this kind of Victorian etching by James McNeill Whistler of the wine glass, sort of the toasting and kind of the sort of essential symbol of remembrance and memory.
Old Lang Syne.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the Whistler is one of our recent acquisitions, part of a group of about 65 Whistler works on paper that were recently given to the museum. And yeah, there's many, as Scott was saying earlier, many recent acquisitions in this show, and it's wonderful to present them for the first time.
Let's take a look at some.
All right.
If
well,
you
we
have
can
a few more minutes.
start right here with this
Oh, yeah.
group. It's actually a work comprised of individual pieces by Mitzi Peterson, who was a San Francisco artist who moved to Berlin, unfortunately. And I think it's just a fantastic piece that has echoes for me of Eva Hess and Richard Tuttle. But in this particular context, I think the quality of the ruin, and particularly the kind of futuristic ruin, is really brought out. And they seem so ephemeral and tantalizing, and yet there's something about them, they're monumental at the same time. There's something about the relationships of form that suggest this very diminished heroicism. I just think they're magical.
It's like a whole course in Feng Shui, the way they're arranged. Did she make the arrangements?
Yes, she did. So that's one of the recent acquisitions. Another is this piece across the room by Marie Bergman, which is part of an ongoing project of hers that is about the memory of fading flowers. And she has been doing this for about 10 years, working with her memory of the fading color of hydrangeas and some other kind of flower that I forget. And so this is her memory of the fading hydrangea about 5 years after it was cut. And if you look at the picture, you can see that the color, in fact, changes from left to right as this is actually 1 month. I believe this is August to September. It's composed of 840, I believe, individual brush marks. There are 840 individual colors, 40,000 individual brush marks. So the creation of the painting itself, there's a suggestion of time in its facture, but also in its expression of her memory.
There's a picture by Paul Sietsema that
Sietsema.
also
Yes.
sounds to me as though it represented years of work.
Yes,
Like
Paul Sietsema
everything is done by hand.
Yes, it's a
Though it
watercolor.
looks photographic.
It looks photographic. It's a monumentally scaled watercolor. It absolutely looks photographic. I was looking at it today. I'm thinking, my God, is this a photograph? But no, it's not. It's a watercolor. And it's a very interesting piece. It's actually a diptych. On one side is a image of a found photograph of a ship, a sailing ship, and on the other, an image of the back of that found photograph, which is just an empty nothing. It's just the back of the photograph. And the ship itself is part of a larger narrative in Sietsema's work that represents a South Seas voyage of discovery, of sort of botanical and ethnological discovery, in a way a metaphor for a lot of the voyages of modern discovery and conquest. So it's about a kind of a scientific colonialism. And yet the piece, as it's represented by Paul, has very much the affect of something that is lost, and the ship looks like a ghost ship, and that it is, the picture itself is very rusticated, it's torn and worn, so there's this sense of a very ambitious adventure that is either forgotten or came to naught or something like that, and I think fits well with the show.
Scott, can you tell me something about the music that we're listening to here in the gallery? Is it one of the works in the show?
It is. It's by Berlin artist Ivan Seal, who is a painter and a sound artist. And he actually, his paintings are kind of famous for being the covers of Leland James Kirby's record covers. And it's a very kind of hauntological sort of key music piece. And so he contributed this sound piece. It's called Stuttering Piano, and it's based on a recording that he made of a young German girl's first piano lesson, but it was made through the walls of an adjacent room without them knowing that it was being recorded. And then he took it and manipulated it and sort of extrapolated from that piece into these kind of more kind of eerier vibrations. But in some of the, it's not, if you listen to it on headphones, you can hear murmured voices, an instructor, in German saying, talking to the girl, and it was very kind of evocative. His paintings are very, very mysterious and dark and kind of a little like not obviously creepy, but they have a very sort of foreboding presence to them. And I really liked his work a lot, and I was really excited to have him in the show.
Yeah, it's very atmospheric and kind of charming, but also there's something unsettling about it.
Right. I wanted it to kind of come in and out of the piece, so there is a silence, so that it's not...
So it's not always playing?
Not always playing, so that it kind of just creeps up on people.
Yeah.
And, and
don't you pity the person who walks into the gallery unknown and not knowing what they're going to get into? Well, I guess the title might give it away, that it's kind of creepy.
Right. And it kind of adds to the experience of looking at things, that it does have a sort of a physical or a sensual quality to it, and it's not just about sort of examining these pictures in a kind of a very distant sort of manner.
I did notice that there was some, as I walk around these walls, some of these pictures seem to fall into these groups. And here's one of them. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about this part of the wall.
Well, you can see they're all figures, and the historical range of this work is rather extreme, going from the Antonia da Trento, 16th century, all the way up to the Travis Collinson drawing that was done a few months ago. They're all works on paper, drawings, etchings. The da Trento is a chiaroscuro. There's a watercolor by Dirk Bell. And they all involve figures in some kind of state of introspection or distraction or coalescence, I guess I would say. There's another interesting quality here that many of the figures appear to be somehow integrating with or disappearing into their environment. They are dispersing somehow, so there's a thin veil between the self and the world that is around them.
And I think when we chose these works, I don't think we realized that, like, how they would play off each other so interestingly, the directionality of all the figures, the front views and the back views, and this like kind of the hiding and revealing, and I thought they kind of evoked this sort of kind of possessed sort of state, almost kind of drugged or not,
It's the agony and the ecstasy.
Yeah, exactly, and in very interesting ways. I think some of them are being terrorized, and some of them are sort of ecstatic, and we have Narcissus, and then we have the Quiz, Sleep of Reason, and then Alfred Hauntological, who is Czechoslovakian? Austrian. This very kind of ghostly sort of grouping of figures that you're not sure quite if they're sort of human or not,
and that's from '68, which is an interesting date for anything.
Right.
And then there's the wonderful Diel Alvarez title of the rock concert, all these young kids at a rock concert with the kind of very provocative title, Dead. It happens to be a Dead Kennedys concert in 1983, so that sort of explains the title, but not really. Right. And the closer you look at it, the more spooky it becomes, and there's all kinds of sort of weird corporeal stuff going on in the interstices among those happy club goers.
Yeah, it feels very kind of purgatorial in almost a way. So, and then this kind of the solitary figures, these sort of, the Dirk Bell is really, it's kind of a very sort of strange photograph of a girl and holding something. You're not sure what she's holding. You're not sure if she's texting somebody on a cell phone or looking at herself in a mirror, but it like has this kind of lost youth quality to it.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, all right, thank you, Kevin.
Always a pleasure to chat with you.
This has been Kevin Killian reporting on Hauntology, the new show at the Berkeley Art Museum. It's running through December 5th, so you've got plenty of time to get here and get scared and be prepared for an interesting tour, not only of the Bay Area's most spooky artists, but a wide international variety of all kinds of mysterious and ghastly things. I know it'll be crowded on Halloween, but you can come any day and get the same experience. Hauntology. Thanks.